like? What's the music like? What's the And the man who was in charge got up, said a few words, took out a rug and unrolled it, turned it towards the wall, and he got down and proceeded to start saying prayers, and I watched all around me. We're the only ones standing. Everybody gets out their rug, and before I know it, 25,000 men, they're kneeling all over this place, and they're chanting together in unison, and they're going through this whole ritual, and that goes on for about 30 minutes, and all of a sudden they get up, and they start rolling up their rugs, and they start filing out, and I'm thinking, this is it? And I said to Reverend Hotle, now wait a minute. There's got to be more to it than this. When do we hear the message? I mean, there's got to be a preacher. I mean, Islam's the fastest growing religion in the world. So you've got to have some preaching. You can't grow a religion without preaching. And I mean, music, if you're going to draw this many people, you got to sing something. And then Sunday school or Sabbath school, Friday school. When is it going to take place? He said, there's no preacher in Islam. Spiritual leader, every once in a while he may make a political speech, but there's no preaching in Islam. There's no Sabbath school. I said, now, Brother Hotle, wait, this just isn't right. If this thing is growing so rapidly and people are willing to die for it, somewhere along the line, somebody's got to be teaching them. He said, well, let me tell you, Islam, this is the way it works. In Islam, every man has a twofold responsibility: to train his children in the principles of Islam, and to try to win his neighbor to Allah. That's it. I said, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard of. And God seemed to whisper to me and say, well, it's my idea. My idea. So what do you mean? Where was the preacher in Judaism? Where was the preacher in the temple? Now, I believe in the foolishness of preaching, but I'm going to tell you primarily it's supposed to be all about salvation. But according to God's plan, it's the Father's place to train His children. I got to thinking about that. You know where I learned my spiritual lessons? Two places. It was around the family altar and around the dinner table. Every night around the family altar, we'd read Scripture, and then we'd take turns around the family commenting about it. Man, my mom, if she ever got off on a second coming, I didn't sleep. She scared me to death. I hope she was right about a lot of things she believed. Or wrong. Because, she got about, deal with the mark of the beast and the Antichrist. She scared me to death. I remember the discussions around the dinner table when we would talk about some of the things that had happened during the day, and Mom and Dad would ask me questions about what was going on at school, and the spiritual lessons that have guided my life, without exception, have come from the dinner table of the family altar. Come on. This is why, even though my children, two of my three children are married, but I believe they would tell you there's not a time that they come home to visit, but that before they leave, we gather. And I want them to hear Dad pray for them. And I want in that prayer, I try to be, Lord, I'm grateful for the way you're using them and the way they succeed. But Lord, it's not about what they do in life as far as the business world. And it's not about how much money they make. It's about their faith. And I pray about the concerns of my heart, that God will help them as parents, and that God will help them not to become so materialistic and to allow this world to hold them all. Because listen, if I win the world but lose my children, I fail. It's not the church's place to teach my children. It's mine. It's not the church's place to train your children. Fathers, it's yours to mold your children. Number 3, we need mothers who will mother their children. Now, I don't mean by that just bring them into the world, but I'm talking about nurturing, caring, loving mothers. I know this is going to date me. It's going to make me sound old-fashioned. But you know what I believe has been the greatest curse in America? Women in the workplace. Now, I know that in our world and in our society that it has become a necessity. I understand that. In fact, my own mother had to work. My dad pastored for years, and bless his heart, my dad could give it away faster than God could give it to him. I know they say that's not possible, but he could. My dad was the kind of guy, if you gave him $1 million this morning, he'd have been $1 million in debt by tonight. And he wouldn't have spent any of it, he'd just given it all away. So years ago, my mom saw we weren't going to have much to eat. So she told my dad, she said, all right, Ray, I'm going to get a job. And said, I'll put the food on the table and you pour every dime you get back into ministry. And that's the way my mom and dad lived. And it worked all right for them. But you know what? I always knew that my mother worked because she had to, but her highest priority was her family. She was a bookkeeper for many years at Cummins Engine Company, an accountant. She would work her schedule so that she could be there when we got in from school at night. She kept a clean house. We always ate around the dinner table and had a warm, home-cooked meal. And we all knew that my mother may work because she had to, but her highest priority was her children. A few years ago now, I picked up a Knoxville News Sentinel there in Knoxville. I remember the front page article. It kind of caught me by surprise. I guess I thought it had been this way for years, but it was saying that fall, for the first time in history, the female population at the University of Tennessee had surpassed the male population. I discovered later that it happened about 8 years ago throughout most of the nation, but UT's a little behind, thank goodness. For the first time that year, the female population had surpassed the male population. But it was some of the next observations that really caught my attention. Where the male population is concerned at UT, the average male student declares his final major the beginning of the second semester of his junior year. What that means is he can't graduate in 4 years. He's wasted so much time and changed his mind so many times that finally he knows Dad's going to kill him if he doesn't get a degree in something. So he finally settles down and chooses. The average female student declares her final major by the end of the first semester of her freshman year. But it was the next observation that really caught my attention. Because in a survey that had been conducted among the UT students, the young ladies were asked about family and about whether they wanted to have a family after college. And here was their response. Number one, after my career is established. And number two, if it will fit in with my career objectives. And when I read that, I thought, oh God, we're in trouble. You see, my mother's generation, family was the priority and work was the add-on. You see the difference? But in this generation, work is the priority, career is the priority, and the children are the add-on. And I'm going to tell you, unless we turn that around, we're in trouble. We need mothers who will recognize that the highest calling in this world is to love and to nurture those precious children that God gives them as a heritage, and to make them the highest priority and the highest goal in their life. When I dedicated little Caleb, at that time my daughter was working at the Farmers Bank in Nicholasville and had done quite well, was up to where she was the assistant cashier. And if you understand banking, that's actually a management position. It's not like the tellers. She was one of two who could go in the vault and actually would deliver the money to the branch banks, with the armed guards going with her. She was the one that would take the money out every day and deliver. It was a management position. And I told my daughter when I dedicated Caleb, I said, honey, your dad's proud of you, but I want to tell you this. Always keep this in mind. God didn't call you to be a banker. He called you to be a mother. And don't you ever get caught in the trap of feeding your family every night out of a McDonald's paper bag or a Chinese take-home box, but have a family meal and have the family around that meal table and recognize that creating a godly, caring, clean, nurturing home is the highest thing in this world.